Art, income, and the IRS, navigating taxes as a creative. This week on the Extreme Personal Finance Show. Awesome. Welcome, everyone, to this episode of the Extreme Personal Finance Show. I'm really thrilled and excited this week because I'm joined by my sister, Jes Reyes. She's a creative in the arts world, a community leader, and someone that really does embody like the intersection of purpose, healing, self-expression through art. Jes is a Twin Cities-based artist and works in many different disciplines. She's a arts program director and empower artists through wellness and creativity. She has years and years of experience leading arts programs and producing exhibits as well as film screenings. She's a really passionate advocate for accessibility in the arts and mental health through creativity. She currently writes deeply personal and inspiring reflections on her Substack, and we'll have a link in the show notes. And she really does like explore identity, healing, artistic resilience. Through her writing, her workshops, and leadership, Jes really helps others discover and amplify their voices, making her not only a brilliant artist, I can say that because she's my sister, but also a true change maker. Welcome to the show. Jes, how you doing?
Hi, Chris. Thanks for having me. This is like a whole new experience to be able to have this conversation with you, with my brother on your podcast. Thank you
Yeah,
for inviting me.
absolutely. Well, so it all started because I subscribed to your Substack and I get your newsletter, and you had shared an experience concerning, this was like around tax time.
Hmm.
And you kind of shared your experience of when you started working with a tax preparer who really wasn't that great, as far as like organization and like how they store your files and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And then when you did like what you went through to kind of find a good tax preparer that you trust. But also I thought it would be really cool to kind of talk through how one does prepare, or, it's like the business side of being a creative. Like, I mean,
Hmm.
if you're a creative and you're an artist, often doing taxes is kind of the last thing on your mind, I would think.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. As you start making an income from being a creative, some people they make like $100 one year and whatever,
Yep.
and then there's I mean it is income, and people can decide how they want to manage that, but it gets to a point where if you're self-employed when you start making money as a creative, even if you don't have a sales tax ID or what have you, you once you cash that check or you receive that money in your Venmo or what have you, you have literally made money as an artist. And so, you need to start thinking about certain parts of managing that income.
Sure, sure. So when did you realize your creative work has kind of crossed this threshold of like, okay, I need like more formal financial infrastructure. I got to start keeping better records. I got to find someone to help me
Hmm.
through this. When did that happen for you?
Um, well, more than 10 years ago, I would say I started making an income as an artist, maybe 2016, 2017, and I had already been practicing as an artist for 10 years.
Mm.
So you can be a professional artist and not be making an income.
Oh yeah.
Uh, yeah. And I had been practicing as a filmmaker, making video essays. I had gone to grad school. And during that time, I had a video installation, and it was the first time that I received a check, you know, uh, and and that was, well, let me be back. I think that was 2015.
Okay.
And I received $500. And I was like, wow, I got money to do this thing. And I didn't know what to do. I was like so scared,
Sure.
like, how do you manage that? Now I have to report that. Um, and I didn't start to make more money until 2017 because I started to sell paintings. So as a filmmaker, I made $500 after 10 years of working. And then when I started selling my paintings. I had always been sketching. I'd always been drawing and doodling, and I had been recommended to consider selling that work. And I was like, well, how do I do that? And once I figured out the marketing parts, very quickly I started selling these watercolor paintings. And in 2017, I was
which
like,
are
this is
which
what I'm
are
going to do.
which are brilliant, by the way.
Oh,
I have
thank
I
you.
have a couple hanging in my house.
Thank you for being my patron. Um, it was just really exciting to be like, oh, wow, I have found a way to continue doing film, but also to really dive into a part of my art practice that was more about healing. It was more about the sort of internal place that I lived in where I needed to express on paper. And I was selling that work. And so once I started bringing in more income, I was also doing consultation work with artists. So I was meeting with artists one on one and receiving income for that as well. And so I started having multiple forms of income as an artist. And I was like, well, I need to be able to manage this. I also want to know in my first year what this is going to look like, because the first year that you start to make income as an artist, it's almost like it's a case study.
Mm.
You're trying to figure out like this is going to become sort of a model for the following year. And so I knew that going in because I had been studying, the work of art, which is a toolkit from Springboard for the Arts, and I had taken some of their classes as well. And I just knew that this was going to be an opportunity. But in 2017, I signed on with an accountant. Not signed on, but you know
Yep,
what I mean. Like
sure.
I was like, okay, I met with them well before, tax time, and got to know them. They worked out of their home, which is great. And I felt like I could trust them. Um, and they helped me put the pieces together, and they filed my taxes. It all went well. And I was very thankful that I had somebody to file my taxes. But when I showed up to pick up my filing, paper copy, it wasn't emailed to me. I was like, come and pick up. I just got an email. Come pick up your taxes. It's filed. And I went to their home, opened their porch door, and there was a filing cabinet. And when I went up to the filing cabinet, it was unlocked. So I was able to open it. And there, amongst my filing were many, many other filings in manila envelopes with their name on it. And, that was sealed. It was
Sure,
sealed.
sure.
Um, but I was like, what am I looking at? Why are my
Right.
taxes like this? Why am I picking up my taxes?
Wow.
And I did not knock on their door. I was more stunned than anything,
Sure.
and I was just thankful that I had my taxes in my hand. And I walked off that porch, telling myself I was not going to work with this person again, just because I obviously didn't feel secure.
Yeah.
Um, my identity was not stolen, and my financial information was safe with me, and obviously locked indoors with that accountant or CPA. But I did not work with them again. Um, I had been on a wait list for a different preparer, which I've been with now since 2018.
Sure, sure. What are some of the things that you did to kind of vet out and find your new, like you said, you're on a wait list.
Mm-hmm.
Now, is it word of mouth? Did you talk with other
Yeah.
artists?
Yeah, I work with Fox Tax, which is based out of Minneapolis, and they are known to specialize working with creatives and self-employed individuals. And so they really understand what artists are going to be writing off in in their taxes,
Sure.
what is a deduction, and what is safe also to be a deduction as an artist. So there's a lot to navigate. with being an artist and your taxes. So yeah, Fox Tax has been amazing. I have many colleagues and friends who also use Fox Tax, so I can
Yeah.
recommend them.
I would think that you would have to have, it's just like, for me, I work with um, individuals that are very familiar with real estate and real estate
Hmm.
income and how to navigate all of the things that happen in real estate. And so
Hmm.
I would think that, yeah, you would need someone that is really focused and understands an artist's income mix,
Yes.
right? Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. And the person I had worked with for that one time,
Hmm.
they had been recommended as someone who does work with artists, and so I already knew that going in. I
Okay.
wanted to work with a CPA that worked with artists because I wanted to feel like they understood who I was, what I was doing, why my income mattered. And I had been on the wait list for Fox Tax for maybe a couple of years before I found myself come up. And that only
Yeah,
because they hired more CPAs because they're in high demand always.
sure.
I think they all always had a wait list.
So for those other artists, and again, we got people that listen all over. So
Yeah, yeah.
for those freelance creatives or those artists, what advice would you give to them on like, they may be afraid to ask too many questions when they're vetting out a CPA, right? Like when they're,
Hmm.
trying to, because really you need to interview them. You need to find out if they're a good fit. What are some of the questions they may ask, or how would you recommend others find a good like
Hmm.
CPA, accountant, or tax professional?
Well, the first thing I would say is don't do it like a week before April 15th.
That's right.
Yeah, I really feel like it's important to be thinking about your taxes, well in advance of when filing season starts. And so, I say right now, what is it? It's almost June.
Mhm.
Now is a great time to
Yeah.
be looking for a CPA because it'll give you time to find somebody you might like. Um, I think also like having asking other artists too. Like if you have
Hmm.
other people that that do make an income, you can always ask them who do they work with? Many artists do their own taxes.
Hmm.
I don't want to do that.
Right.
But many do and they figure it out. And I say do research and use community resources. At least in Minnesota, we have a Springboard for the Arts, which is a really great organization providing resources for artists to make a living and understand how to make a living. And that includes the business side. And they'll always have workshops. They have, they sometimes will bring in a CPA to give advice. So I think a big part of it is just making sure it's a conversation with yourself and making sure you're accessing resources to understand because uh,
Hmm.
never work in a bubble. I always encourage people don't work in a bubble.
Right.
There is a really great resource called Sunlight Tax, which is national based. And a person that runs that, she is an artist, but she's also a tax professional, and she gives great advice. She has her own podcast, she does workshops, things like that. So I always listen to that podcast.
Wonderful. Yeah, I think that it's one of those things where, I had gone through a few different tax preparers, and working with someone that kind of has that spirit of an educator and can kind of
Hmm.
help you understand, like not just like give them the stuff and close your eyes and close your ears and like magically
Hmm.
things get done. Um,
Hmm.
at least things are kind of explained to me in a way on like, well, why did we do it this way? Or, and,
Hmm.
I do feel as though you can still find those people that are looking out for your best interest, kind of a fiduciary, if you will.
Yes, yep, yep.
And they're going to be looking out for things and kind of help you along the way. So that's really
Yeah.
important.
Yeah, and you had wondered what kind of questions to be
Hmm.
asking, and I think one thing is to understand what they can and can't do for you. And asking them also how many artists had they worked with before, what kind of self-employed people, because that's really what the thing is that you're going to work with them because they understand self-employment, um, and also the types of income that artists receive, because artists are not only getting money from selling art. If an artist needs to make a living, it's very rare that it's going to come from selling. It needs to be multiple things. An artist can definitely get there, but it takes years to be able to build up enough income as an artist selling, and that be your only form.
You mean,
So
Jess, you're not dropping
yeah.
those $5 million commissions yet, or what?
No, no, or $5,000 paintings. That would be great. No, no, that's definitely hasn't been my priority, and I haven't really been selling much at all the last 2 years. I've been getting grants, and that's income directly from the state of Minnesota. I've received $30,000 over the last 3 years
Wow.
from the state of Minnesota to learn weaving and adding textiles into my art practice. And so I've been focused on that. And I have sold some of that work, but really I've been building a body of work that I can then exhibit and sell. So it's just been a little different part of my art practice journey. Um, so, yeah.
I love that. I know that there was at a conference that I was at last year, we kind of broke out. I think it was like entrepreneurship or like self-employment kind of
Hmm.
breakout session. And I had one of the gentlemen that we focused on in my little breakout session. There's probably like, I don't know, four of us there. He's like, well, I'm a art teacher. He's been an art teacher for years and years and years, and he's finally going to retire, but he
Hmm.
wants to now do art like full time, and he doesn't know
Hmm.
how to do art without doing like an exhibit of his own stuff. And I took kind of like a page from your book
Mm.
because he was like, I don't know what to do or how to start. And I was like, well, one thing, some things that like my sister has done is, well, put some of your art in a coffee shop, or
Hmm.
some of those other some of the other pieces that you have, make postcards or greeting cards of the art. Make like, and
Hmm.
it was really like he was like feverishly taking notes of all these ideas of things, because
Yeah.
in his mind it was like, well, this is my only path to be an
Yeah.
artist, but there are so many other, and then you can piggyback on other artists that already have exhibits. You could like have a few of your pieces displayed, and there's a lot of different ways that they could be successful.
Yeah. I encourage artists to write a business plan. How boring
Ooh,
is that? No, it's not boring. It's a story. It's a story
yeah.
when it comes down to it. And usually a business plan is written for someone else, right? It's because you're asking for an investor or you want to partner with someone, you need a loan, I don't know. So usually it's something, that you are using for that purpose. But as an artist, sometimes if we don't come from a background that understands the business side
Hmm.
of being an artist, it's hard to see the tree. I like to call it a tree, and all the branches that an artist can create. And, sometimes the tree is fuller in certain areas because, one year you had a greeting card line, or you had a project where you published a book of all of your paintings and you were selling it or what have you. There's like so many different ways. And I look at business planning in terms of years, or the year is a project. And so when you enter into a year, a business plan can help you identify a plan that obviously can change, but it can help create a narrative to who you are as an artist, what you want to do as an artist, and who you might need to partner with, who you might need to market to. There's so many elements, and that first year of just starting out is research. I think is just kind of building up an identity or a path. And it takes 3 to 5 years for a small business, basically an artist, that person is a small business.
Hmm.
It takes 3 to 5 years for a small business to make or a profit,
Sure.
and you have to really spend that time kind of really figuring it out and strengthening areas where if that's what you want to do and you want to make a living, however much money that might be for you each year, because it might be part-time, but you're still making a living,
Hmm.
and I think it just, you have to figure out what works best for you and what your goals and intentions are, and your business plan can help you do that.
I love that. I never would have thought a business plan for an artist. I think that's a wonderful
Mhm.
idea. I think
Oh yeah,
that's
there's Google it. There's lots of resources out there. And a business plan has, structure, but at the end of the day, it can look however you want it to look.
yeah, that's awesome. So what, and actually that just reminded me of a little bit, like I'm just kind of curious, do artists or would you recommend, I don't know how you do it, like are you a sole proprietor as an
Mhm.
artist or do people create LLCs for their
Yes.
okay.
Yes, there are different types of business structures that artists may decide to register as.
Hmm.
And not most, but many artists, when they're starting off, they're sole proprietors. And I am a sole proprietor. And within the last couple of years, I now have an LLC as a sole proprietor. But I practiced primarily as a sole proprietor without an LLC for, nearly 10 years. I just didn't need an LLC yet. And I think kind of just figuring out what those legal, the sort of that this part becomes the legal aspects
Hmm.
of being self-employed, and sort of figuring out how to create protections around your business, and keeping it separate from your personal. Because as a sole proprietor, yep, everything is connected to your personal income. It's tied to your home. It's tied to
Hmm.
so many elements of your personal investments. And once you decide you might need to go into an LLC, um, those questions around what kind of protections do you need as a business
Yeah, I think
come into
that's one of the
play.
things is, a single person LLC, it really is around some of those protections. There's really no,
Hmm.
tax advantage per se.
No,
Everything
no,
just
no,
still
no.
flows right
Hmm.
to your personal
Yep.
return. But
Yeah.
um, I was gonna ask you, so now, like you mentioned, like now's a great time to be like starting to maybe
Yeah.
find someone to work with. What does your tax prep workflow look like today? Like from January to April, or like, you know what I mean? Like after tax season,
Hmm.
you're working now for next year.
Yep.
How do you stay organized with all that? Or how do you like, what's your workflow look like today?
Well, in 2017, I enrolled in QuickBooks Self-Employed, and I have been using that since 2017. And I keep my business finances separate from my personal finances. And so
Good for you.
I have like multiple accounts
Yeah.
that are specific to my business, from a savings account to supplies to the income coming in. And that's all connected to my credit card. That's all connected to my QuickBooks. And so I can just go into QuickBooks and start to organize my bookkeeping. I am my bookkeeper, and my tax preparer is not my bookkeeper. And that's a big thing, is to know, is like, for the work that you're doing throughout the year is just organizing your finances and understanding what your expenses have been and what your income has been. And I have definitely gotten really busy during some years. Like last year, I was so busy. I mean, I couldn't believe the amount of projects that I had going on, or partnerships and different exhibits. And there was a point where I accidentally, I mean, you're just like, it just happens. I
Hmm.
accidentally deposited like a $1,500 check into my personal account. And this is the great thing about my tax preparer. What, like, was looking at all of my numbers. It's like, something's off here.
Mm,
Like, you're missing $1,500 in income. And I'm like, oh, and
right.
that helped me, right? And I was like, oh, I'm gonna do a better job in 2025, so I don't run into that issue in 2026. So even if you're doing that work, you're doing really good bookkeeping, there is occasionally, so say be kind to yourself, but it can get squishy. But that's the thing about keeping your finances separate, is when you run into that situation, where you might have deposited a check into the wrong account. Your CPA can help you because you've been doing good bookkeeping, help you figure out there's something missing.
Right.
But I think it's just a matter of I use that resource because I don't want to have to dig through receipts. I don't want to have to, I know all of those receipts. I have them all. They're all documented. But that QuickBooks, it's right there. And thank goodness for that kind of technology. Otherwise, it would be so annoying. Some
Yeah,
people use spreadsheets. I use
sure.
spreadsheets to track, my general month to month. So I know where like how much money I'm putting into savings and how much money I'm not putting into savings. But yeah, I hope that answers your question. I kind
Yeah.
of jumped around a little bit.
No, no, it does. And it's funny you mentioned that keeping records throughout the year and making it easy and doing the bookkeeping. So one of my businesses, I am really horrible at keeping records. And yeah, what I'll do is all of a sudden it's like, oh man, I spend like 10 hours in one day going through a stack of receipts. And I'm like
Yeah,
I'm doing a bunch of bookkeeping and it's like you get burnt out and you're like,
yeah,
wait, where am I? What am I doing? Oh my gosh, it's horrible. So yeah, you've inspired me. I got to take better track of it throughout the year for sure.
yeah. I mean, especially if you have multiple forms of income or different, I've also in the last 5 years, I added a project to sort of my offerings. It's a cinema program called Moonplay, and like I was getting separate income from that, and so I had to create a whole new, you know, account for that. Different grants were coming in, donations were coming in, and I had to keep that separate from Jes Reyes art, even though it's all combined. I really needed to understand what the budget was, and QuickBooks really helped me with that. The other part to it, yeah, it saves time, like to have that information chronologically throughout the year. It's just so helpful. So,
Hmm.
um, yeah.
Awesome. I love it. Let's actually talk a little bit about too. You and I have we texted periodically over the last couple of years about finding a wealth advisor or someone
Mm-hmm.
about investing. Talk a
Mm-hmm.
little bit about setting up like your IRA
Mm-hmm.
and, because you want to reduce your tax liability, but also you want to be investing in your future, right? So
Mm-hmm.
how does a self-employed artist think about retirement and putting money away for
Yeah.
when you're older?
Well, the first disclaimer is I've always been an artist with a day job. So,
That's true.
so that's the other part of having an accountant was being able to know that I have W-2 income. I'm filing married, jointly as well. There's multiple elements. And so then also I want to retire. I want to be able to retire. And what does that look like for me? It's going to look different than my husband
Wait, hold up.
who,
Time
yeah,
out, time out. So when you retire, you would do art.
yes. Yeah. So I'm not really retired. I'm retired from the day job. Do you know
That's
what I
right.
mean? Like,
Yep.
and so I don't think that the art side of things is going to go away. I might just be doing my thing or whatever and showing up to the studio.
Hmm.
But yeah, I'm retiring from the day job and retiring from some things related to self-employment. I have had a 401k for a long time, and that I had sitting for a while after I left that job, and it was just staring at me. It was a pretty good chunk of change, and I was like, what can I do with this? How do I, start to be intentional with that money? Because it was just kind of, it was sitting. I wasn't adding to it or anything, and I had opened up, my own personal IRA that I put money into annually, uh, and then my CPA one year when I had it was I was a couple of years ago. I made the most money I had ever made as a self-employed person. I mean, when you look at the money, you're like, oh, you should probably just be doing your self-employment. But with all the expenses and all of that, it really came down to a lot less than what the income was.
Sure.
But she was trying to help me. I had to pay in, I owed taxes
Hmm.
because of that. And, my CPA is there to help me figure out also what can help me save as much money on how much I need to pay in taxes. And she recommended a SEP IRA,
Hmm.
which is for self-employed individuals. And I was like, what's that?
Yeah.
I've only just known about, these other parts of investing for retirement. And yeah, she's like, she knew exactly how much money I was allowed to put into a SEP IRA. I can't just like willy-nilly put money into it.
Hmm.
It is connected to how much money I made that year. And so it was my CPA. And at that time, my spouse and I were also looking for someone who could help advise us on strategies for retirement because, yeah, I would love to retire with him. He's just a couple years older than me. So, yeah, we started working and interviewing people, and they helped us figure it out. They got the SEP IRA set up, and now it's second year. I was able to put money into it again this year, or for last year's income. And yeah, I just make sure that money is set aside. I move money for my self-employment as well.
Yeah, and
So
I
yeah.
think I'm not 100%, I'm not a tax professional, but I think
Hmm.
SEP IRAs, you can contribute like 25% of
Oh,
your
is that it? Yeah.
overall
Thank you.
compensation. Yeah.
Thank you.
So that's, I
You're
think, so I'll double check.
yes,
Oh, no,
yes.
that's awesome. That's really good. And I think it's great that, again, I'd like others, to be inspired to, I should start thinking about what am I going to do when I'm 62, 65, 70, right?
Oh yeah. And I'm 46, it'd be great I'm like, I want to retire when I'm 55.
Yeah.
And,
You
or,
can,
you know
you
what
can
I
do
mean?
it.
Like I can do it.
Yeah.
And I just have to come up with that plan, right? Like
I
how do
love
you,
it.
I mean, it's a plan.
Did you feel as though there was some sort of mindset shift about taxes being something that was kind of like overwhelming and scary to like, oh no, I can use this to be empowered and save for my future and
Yeah.
that.
Yes. I'm among many artists and probably also just general self-employed people that are just scared of the IRS,
Oh, yeah, me too. Yeah.
right? Yeah,
Everyone
yeah.
is.
And really, I don't know what I was scared other than them like auditing me or like telling me I'm doing something wrong or I owe more money or whatever. And those are all, it's like you're building a story in your
Hmm.
head that's not going to happen unless you're being, or, you're lying on your taxes or something. Um, but yeah, I was scared. But I'm definitely a person who is like not afraid of a challenge, especially related to my career. And I just knew I had to do something. And I started asking questions. I started going to workshops. I started reading. And the more I did that, and then also just doing my taxes, like just starting to build practice in that area
Hmm.
as a self-employed person, I feel more confident now, even though every year I go into those, even though I've done really great bookkeeping, my hands are sweating.
Yeah.
Like, I'm like sitting in that meeting, and Nils, my husband's always like, you're always like this every year, but you do a great job. And I'm like, I know, but what if there's something?
Right, right. So,
Yeah.
I guess what would you say to an artist
Hmm.
who is feeling anxious and
Hmm.
needs to start being serious about earning an income, paying their taxes? Like, what's that piece of advice you'd give them?
Make it a goal,
Okay.
write it down. Anxiety can be released through writing and understanding what you need. And so I just recommend somebody to be able to acknowledge that this is something that you need to understand and start to build into your routine. And so I think I also advise that if a creative has access to someone that they can talk to who is also an artist, I do that often through Springboard for the Arts. I'm an artist career consultant. And that means that I can meet with artists for an hour and talk about what kind of questions they might have, whatever fears or anxieties they might have as an artist, just being able to talk to someone rather than it being a bubble. I've met many artists who spent years without filing their taxes,
Hmm.
and they had made $10,000 or sometimes more, and so that's when, like, don't let yourself get there, because you are going to be in trouble.
Hmm. Exactly.
And I don't want to go to IRS jail, which
That's
is
right.
just means that, like, you could go to jail, but also, like, you are going to owe a lot of money, and that is a form of jail.
Hmm.
And so you can't move forward unless you acknowledge it and also start to work with someone so you're not alone.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, I think that's a great way to kind of wrap up the conversation. I think that as an artist, you can build some financial stability. Taxes are a much bigger picture of sustaining your continuing art practice.
Hmm.
And like you mentioned, keeping organized records, understanding your deductions, working with someone that you can trust,
Hmm.
and just filling out the paperwork. You can do it.
You can.
Yeah.
You can, and it can be fun. You can be like, oh, look at that money I made.
That's
Look at all
right.
those art supplies I bought.
That's awesome. Well, I want
Right?
to thank you so much for joining me. I really do appreciate it. Thank
Yeah, of
you.
course.
Um,
Yeah.
Let people know where they can learn more about your art,
Yeah.
look at some of the stuff that you've done and who you
Yeah.
are, where they can find you.
Yep. So my name is Jes Reyes. That's Jess with one S. And I have my own website, jessreyes.com. You can find me on Instagram, Jes Reyes Art. Also have a Substack, jessreyesart.substack.com. I do post articles there. I try to use it as a blog and newsletter. And you can find me at Springboard for the Arts too, as a consultant that I can meet with a creative one-on-one. It's done over Zoom, and so I can meet with people across the country.
That's awesome. And I want you to take a little bit of time and share. You just got back from a trip because people love to travel.
Oh
And
yeah.
you just got back from a trip, but it was like an artist focused trip. Tell
Hmm.
people a little bit of where you were and what you were doing.
Yeah. So I'll start back in December. I got an email from my mother-in-law, Alice, who's also a creative. My art studio is located uh, in her house, which is we call Little House, and my studio is the attic loft. Um, and so I'm really close with Alice, and Alice had emailed me, forwarded me an email, and asked me if I was interested in this trip. And I looked at the email, and it was a textile focused tour of Iceland. And
I wouldn't even know what that is, but it sounds
yeah, yeah.
fantastic.
Oh yeah. I don't need to go into all the details, but Iceland is known for its wool, and
Okay.
wool is a dominant industry in yarn making, spinning and
Hmm.
dyeing yarn, and so they have special sheep in Iceland. Um,
Really?
and yeah,
Special.
yeah. They're
I had no
one of the
idea.
purest breeds, one of the
Really?
purest breeds in the world. The
Wow.
Vikings brought the Icelandic sheep. So it's become the Icelandic sheep that the Vikings brought, and 1,000 years old, and they are the purest breed. They're very isolated on the island, so no exporting or importing. And because of the crazy weather there, these sheep have they've been able to adapt because of that. Okay, so Iceland. Yes, I did this amazing trip. I was Alice's companion. She's, in her mid to late 80s, and wanted to do this trip, but also knew that she couldn't do it alone. And so she's like, will you go with me? Will you be well, she called me her service animal. She's like, will you be my service animal? And I was like, I would be a service animal and anything else you want me to be. And so we had a blast. It was around 18 of us, I think, and other people who are interested in the textile, are textile people, either hobbyist or an artist. It was just amazing. And it's organized by the Textile Center here in Minnesota. And this is maybe the fourth time they've done a textile focused tour. They've gone to Morocco, they've done Iceland 3 times, they went to Guatemala. Like, they do these amazing tours, and they work with someone in that country to help build, these destinations. And Iceland has been the most popular, and it was very rich every day. It was never a dull moment. Like we were constantly, doing a workshop, touring a mill. Like it was just amazing. Yeah. And I bought so much yarn. I spent time at the Icelandic Textile Center. That was amazing, where I might do a residency with 1 year. So yeah, I encourage that kind of travel, where it goes beyond being a tour. I definitely did touristy things, but if you can go beyond the touristy things, you can really grow,
Hmm.
as a creative. Whenever I travel internationally, I'm always building in some kind of art relevant activity. So yeah,
Awesome. I love it. Well, thanks for sharing. I want to,
yeah.
again, thank you for joining me on this episode. I really do appreciate it. Everyone that's listening, thank you so much. And watching on YouTube, please like, subscribe, follow, share with your friends, your family. And we will see you next time on the Extreme Personal Finance Show. See ya.